I'm Matthew, and today for this month's Wallace Branch Bird Talk, we'll be discussing the most common and only breeding hummingbird in our area, the ruby-throated hummingbird. I figured now would be a great time to talk about them because they should be showing up any day now if they're not already here by the time this video comes out. So, without further ado, let's begin. So, in our area, 99% of the time, if you see a hummingbird, especially in summer, it's going to be a ruby-throated. So, identification is fairly easy. It's the only hummingbird that breeds in eastern North America. So just look for a very small emerald green blur with a long, thin beak hovering quickly through the air. Their overall shape is mostly slender with a very short tail and long oval wings. Their colored feathers are iridescent, which means that their microstructure of the feathers reflects light like tiny prisms, making them appear different colors at different angles. This is especially noticeable on the male's red throat feathers, also called a gorget, which can appear black from different angles. This can cause some confusion for bird watchers, particularly if they don't already know how to look for it. We'll see an example of this on the next slide, so I want to go ahead and bring it up here. So juveniles and females are incredibly similar in appearance, being duller overall and lacking the bright red gorget that the male has. You see here, it's just kind of blank, few little dark feathers. The male has this bright red necklace here. If I absolutely had to guess, I would say that this picture here is a juvenile, since it's overall pretty dull and the feathers look pretty fresh. You see the wings, they're nice and even, but it's very difficult to say for sure, so I wouldn't really bank on that for right now. Just know that this is what the juveniles and females look like. So now that we know a little bit about how to identify them, let's talk about their behavior for a little bit, their ecology. And so before we get too busy, I want to point this out. This is a male hummingbird. From a different angle, you can see that the gorget looks completely black as opposed to red as you're used to seeing it. Again, that's like looking at a prism from a different angle, which is why it looks like that. But this is still a ruby-throated hummingbird. And when I was going back about the juvenile feathers looking fresh, if you notice, a lot of times late in the season, like late in the summer, you'll see that the adult feathers start looking a little raggedy before they molt. So just want to point that out real quick, but on to the nitty-gritty. So, like other hummingbirds, ruby-throats rely heavily on nectar from flowers, being particularly attracted to red and orange blossoms of plants like bottlebrush and trumpet vine. The term for animals with this kind of diet is nectarivore, like carnivore or herbivore, but for nectar instead. However, they also eat flying insects like mosquitoes, bees, and wasps, as well as bugs attracted to tree sap, which they also sometimes eat, bugs like caterpillars and spiders. Hummingbirds are consistently feeding due to their high metabolism and rapid heartbeat, leading them to eat around twice their own body weight in food a day. Scientists who handle these birds for bird banding have to keep nectar on hand to feed the birds while they process their information, like, their weight, their size, so that the birds don't get too weak to fly away once they've been measured and tagged. If you want to feed hummingbirds, you can pick up a specific hummingbird feeder at any garden store. You'll just want to make sure that there's red somewhere on the feeder. Most hummingbird feeders do, though. Place it in a relatively open area, especially somewhere near flowers if you can. As for the nectar, just mix 1 part sugar and 5 parts water. Hummingbirds have kidneys the size of a rice grain, so putting food dye in the nectar is actually really bad for them, so don't do that. The red on the feeder will be enough to attract them. You don't mess with the red food dye. You'll also want to replace the nectar in the feeder every 3 days or so to keep it from fermenting, particularly when it's hot out. You can always plant flowers like honeysuckle, trumpet vine, or bottlebrush to attract them as well. So hummingbirds are highly territorial and aren't afraid to chase birds much larger than themselves away from their food sources. They're less intolerant of other hummingbirds during migration and farther inland where population densities are higher, but generally they'll quickly fight off other birds on sight. Males are especially aggressive towards other males, but females are also territorial. If you set up more than one hummingbird feeder in your yard, make sure they're out of eyesight from each other, or you'll find them both being dominated by just one or two birds. The primary vocalizations of ruby-throated hummingbirds are squeaky chirps, given primarily to warn intruders that they're not welcome in a territory before being physically chased off. While not a vocalization, they also give off a humming, buzzing sound from their rapid wing beats, reminiscent of an oversized bee. Males court females in the breeding season by giving a U-shaped pendulum flight in front of the female and flying back and forth in front of her while making buzzing and whirring sounds from flapping his wings even faster than normal while flying. Once the male and the female mate, they go their separate ways, and the female assumes all parental care and nest building responsibilities. Ruby throat nests are tiny, tiny cups about the size of a large thimble. They're made of twigs, spider silk, plant fluff, and lined with lichen. Nests are generally built on twigs over an open area below a leaf canopy. The female incubates 1 to 3 eggs for about 2 weeks, then the nestlings leave the nest after about 3 weeks, then are completely independent after about another week. The young are altricial, which means they're born naked and helpless, and females will usually raise 1 to 2 broods a season. Just want to kind of point out this is a young male here. So he's still kind of patchy overall and dull, but he's starting to get that pretty gorget down. So now let's talk a little bit about their range and habitat. This range map is from Cornell Lab of Ornithology, so it's color-coded a little differently from the Audubon maps we've been seeing in the past. The orange, this is their summer range here, kind of coming up through here. The blue, so like down here and along here. This is their winter range where they go in the colder months. And then this yellow is their migration route. You see they kind of take a few paths. And it's not really shown here very well, but most of the ruby throats will actually cross the Gulf of Mexico in one non-stop flight to and from their summering grounds. So they're generally found in gardens, open woodlands, suburbs, really anywhere with lots of flowers and vegetation and open spaces. It's the only hummingbird that breeds in the eastern U.S. and over the past 20 years ago has been seen wintering here in increasing numbers, but it's still fairly rare outside of summer. Most ruby throats that come to our neck of the woods fly nonstop over the Gulf of Mexico during spring and fall migration. If you look here, you can see they winter in Central America, and then again they cross over the Gulf of Mexico to breed all the way around here in the summer. And when they migrate, some of them will kind of come an interior route here. Some of them will kind of come around this way over the Bahamas, the Caribbean islands, and you'll see small, steady little population that regularly winters in South Florida as well. Alright, so I kind of touched on this, but we do sometimes have other hummingbirds from the western half of North America show up in Georgia in the wintertime, even though it's still kind of rare. It happens regularly, so I figured I'd just kind of point these out just for fun. So the 3 most commonly seen western hummingbirds we see here in Georgia in the winter are the black-chinned, this fellow here, the rufous hummingbird here, and the calliope hummingbird here. So I have pictures of the adult males here, but the females look like the males, except they don't have the gorget on the throat and they're more dull in color. Like the female rufous hummingbird here will have a lot more green. It won't have these pretty orange gorget feathers. The calliope hummingbird here, again, it's more green, more dull, won't have these pretty feathers, and kind of the same for the black-chinned hummingbird. The black-chinned hummingbird and the rufous, they're a little bit bigger than the ruby-throated, So that's one way you can kind of tell their overall shape is different from the ruby-throated as well if you see the females. Particularly the black-chinned is more slender, he's more tall, and the rufous is just overall more chunky. Now the calliope hummingbird is the smallest bird in North America. It is tiny, tiny, tiny. So if you see just what looks like an absolutely minuscule little hummingbird in your yard in the winter, it's going to be one of the calliope hummingbirds. Sometimes other hummingbirds show up too, but again, these are kind of the ones that are the most commonly seen. So I just thought it'd be fun to point them out to you real quick. And so, finally, a few fun facts in Audubon. So, hummingbirds as a family are the only birds that can fly backwards. They can kind of go in just about any direction, just, backwards, forward, up, down. Ruby-throats beat their wings at approximately 53 times a second. Going back to what we were saying earlier, these birds have to consistently eat high-energy foods like nectar to keep up the kind of energy it takes to be constantly flying like that. The average lifespan for a ruby-throated hummingbird is about 5 years, but the oldest known individual was captured and recaptured at 9.1 years old as part of a banding operation in West Virginia. The ruby-throated hummingbird is the only breeding hummingbird in the eastern North America, but it holds the largest breeding range of any hummingbird in North America. Hummingbirds, as a rule, play a very important role in the ecosystem as pollinators, just like bees. By feeding from flower to flower, they take up pollen in their beaks and feathers, and they transfer the pollen to the other plants that they visit as a result. So one last little fun fact, while ruby-throats are one of the most aggressive non-raptors, raptor being another term for predatory bird like a hawk or a falcon, in their range, they usually subordinate to other hummingbird species when they come into contact with them, meaning they usually get out of the way and don't put up much of a fight when they get into confrontations with the other hummingbird species. So, that is all I have for today. These are the sources I got today's information from, so if you want to learn more about these wonderful birds, I highly suggest checking these out. I'll hold these up for a second or two so you can pause the video if you'd like and jot these down. However, you can always use your Pines card to put some great bird books on hold at gapines.org or call any of our libraries for more assistance. So, on behalf of the Augusta-Richmond County Library System, I'd like to thank you again for tuning in, and I wish you happy birding. Bye.